It just doesn't stop. The hell that Ukraine has been putting the Crimean occupiers through isn't easing up. It's only getting stronger. How? Ukraine just cut another key land bridge to Crimea, attacking from both sides. Crimea isn't a peninsula anymore, it's an island. Isolated, bereft of support. Ukraine's liberation plan is so perfect that it's causing a lethal trap to close around the Russian occupiers. Putin is losing control. And the best part is that Russia saw all of this coming, but it still couldn't do a thing to stop it. We take you to the Kerch Strait. Long used as a logistical route for Russia, this strait was once one of Russia's greatest strengths. But now, Ukraine has mid-range strike drones, which means that the Kerch Strait has transformed from an asset into a major liability. That's precisely what we saw overnight on June 21st. Ukraine struck, over and over again. By the end of the drone bombardment, fires were being reported in occupied Kerch as well as Russia's Port Kavkaz, which is in the Krasnodar region, and inside Crimea itself. Another artery is being sliced open. And it's Russia's fuel and supplies that are spilling out like a torrent of blood. Ukraine isn't being shy about any of this. In the wake of the strikes, President Volodymyr Zelensky took to Telegram to rub the Russian failure right in Putin's face. Sharing footage of the aftermath of one of Ukraine's strikes, Zelensky declared, "Last night our long-range sanctions targeted the occupiers' military logistics, oil industry, and air defense. All of this is just a response to Russia's brutal attacks against our people. I thank the warriors of the Security Service of Ukraine, the Unmanned Systems Forces, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, and the Special Operations Forces for their successful work at a distance of about 300 kilometers from the front line." Ukraine is so confident in proclaiming what it's doing for a reason. It knows it has Russia trapped in Crimea and Putin can do nothing about it. We saw that on June 21st, as the sheer number of strikes that Ukraine pulled off shows us that whatever solutions Russia thinks it has for dealing with Ukraine's logistical lockdown of Crimea aren't good enough. A combination of eyewitness reports, satellite fire detection, and Ukraine's own reporting gives us the full story. Facilities on both sides of the Kerch Strait were hit, including maritime oil logistics infrastructure in Krasnodar and an oil depot in Kerch. The former facility is used to move fuel into Crimea and the occupied territories. It's located on the Chushka Spit and serves as one of Russia's most vital logistical hubs in the Black Sea and Sea of Azov regions. In other words, Port Kavkaz in Krasnodar is vital for keeping the occupiers in Crimea and southern Ukraine supplied. As for the latter, a burning oil depot always means less fuel for Putin's forces. In this case, it's possible that Ukraine struck the iGaz terminal liquefied gas complex at the depot, along with potentially taking out fuel. The Crimean Wind Telegram channel reveals that NASA's firm's satellite monitoring system has detected what it dubs thermal anomalies in the Kerch Strait region, which started at around 1 a.m. local time. Thermal anomalies translates to massive and terrifying fires from which there is no escape. United 24 media adds that eyewitnesses on the ground reported explosions, drones, and the failing attempts of Russian air defenses to stop these strikes in several regions, including Kerch, Bakhchisarai, Sevastopol, and Simferopol. Footage has already started spreading around on social media. Beyond what the Crimean Wind channel has shared, videos offered up by Serhiy Stanenko on X show the Kerch seaport ablaze following Ukraine's massive drone strike. We see massive fires, smoke billowing into the air, and videos of huge blazes that Ukraine has caused. All of this is starting to become a common sight in Putin's invasion. A country that was never supposed to be able to hit Russia at range is unleashing drones almost daily to shatter Russia's energy infrastructure and cripple the logistics that feed Crimea. A double-ended strike is bad enough for Russia, but Ukraine was far from done. An interesting Telegram post was published by Russia's Krasnodar task force following Ukraine's attack. On the night of June 21st, a person was killed at the Kerch ferry crossing as a result of an attack by enemy forces. The Panagia ferry was attacked at the Kerch ferry crossing in the Temryuk district. According to preliminary reports, one person was killed and another was injured. Russia is clearly trying to create a narrative in which Ukraine has attacked a civilian ferry, as it makes no mention of any military purpose for this strike. But Russia is lying. Again. The Panagia is no cruise ferry. As United 24 media reveals, this ferry has become increasingly vital for Russian logistics ever since repeated Ukrainian attacks against the Kerch Bridge that links Russia to Crimea forced Putin's forces to stop using that land route. The outlet reports that open-source analysts have documented that this particular ferry had been used to transfer air defense missile components and military equipment between mainland Russia and Crimea. Krasnodar's task force wants you to believe that Ukraine heartlessly killed somebody riding a ferry. What they don't tell you is that this ferry was a military asset and Ukraine just hit it hard. In the wake of the ferry attack, Russia responded with pure panic. All ferry operations between Port Kavkaz and Kerch have been suspended, with Russian authorities instructing the military to use overland routes that run through Rostov-on-Don, Melitopol, Mariupol, and Simferopol. That seems like a good idea. It's not like Ukraine has been raining drone hellfire on the R280 highway that connects all of these regions for weeks now. Oh wait, that's exactly what Ukraine is doing. Putin's patsies have been told that they have to leap out of the frying pan and into the fire on an overland route that Ukraine's drones are dominating. That's desperation in its purest form, and it shows us just how badly Russia is doing at keeping its Crimean occupiers supplied. Putin's solution to a key waterway being cut off is to send his soldiers down a highway of death where Ukraine's drones could strike at any time, and Russia won't be able to do much to protect its cargo and supplies on the R280. Already vulnerable, that road, along with all of Crimea and the logistical routes that feed into it, has become an even bigger target. Ukraine took out something else very important during its June 21st raid, yet more of the air defenses that are supposed to be protecting all of this. The Secret Service of Ukraine, or SBU, revealed all in a Telegram post stating, in addition, the SBU and the SOU disabled 4 radar stations from the S-400 anti-aircraft missile system and 2 Pantsir anti-aircraft missile and gun systems located directly on the Crimean bridge. Those air defense units were positioned near the crossing that Ukraine targeted moments later, so we see here a very intelligent and layered approach to strikes. Take out the air defenses first, then hit the targets. But there's more to it than that. With the loss of 3 more air defense systems that were supposed to be protecting Crimea and its logistics, Russia now has to deal with the exacerbation of a massive problem that is making all of this possible in the first place. Russia is running out of air defenses. And that means Crimea is being transformed from a peninsula into an isolated island that can't defend itself. That's Ukraine's goal, and it's all part of the perfect plan from which Russia can't escape. But before we dig deeper into all of that, this is a reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to hit the button before we get back into the report. Let's make something crystal clear. Russia's forces in occupied Ukraine depend on Crimea. For most of Putin's invasion, Russia has taken advantage of Crimea's status as a peninsula to keep its troops supplied elsewhere in Ukraine. But now that status is changing, and Ukraine's Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov reveals how. He says that Ukraine is turning Crimea into an island, which is going to lead to very unexpected consequences for the Russians. Fedorov didn't say any more. Maybe he didn't want to ruin the surprise. But we can speculate, and there are 3 very clear scenarios that Ukraine could create if it's able to build on everything that it's doing to completely isolate Crimea. For one, Crimea keeps Russia's troops in the occupied portions of Zaporizhzhia supplied. Those troops are supposed to be pushing into the region's capital city, and Putin has demanded that Russia captures that city by the end of the summer. Progress is already slow. Despite ramping up assaults, RBC Ukraine reports that Russia has failed to make any notable advances in the Zaporizhzhia region. Putin's patsies have a little over 2 months to achieve the goal that their insane leader has set for them. It was already looking unlikely. If those forces are cut off from Crimea, an unlikely attack becomes impossible. Zaporizhzhia city will hold, and Russia will end up facing another year where it hasn't been able to take advantage of the summer months. Then there's Kherson. You may already know that this particular oblast has been in the news during the last couple of weeks. Earlier in June, Ukraine launched a drone strike against the Chonar bridge that connects Kherson to Crimea, and it followed that up by attacking the alternative crossings that Russia tried to use to maintain its logistical throughput. That alone signals a pretty obvious second consequence of Ukraine turning Crimea into an island. Russia will really start to struggle to hold onto the occupied regions of Kherson. Ukraine already forced Putin's forces to abandon the oblast's capital city in 2022, which was made possible by a constant stream of strikes that targeted Russian logistics on the west bank of the Dnipro River, making holding the city untenable. What we're seeing now in Kherson is the same strategy playing out on a much grander scale. Russia controlled about 3/4 of the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions by the summer of 2025, Al Jazeera reports. Ukraine's isolation of Crimea will make it much more difficult for Russia to maintain a hold on the portions of the oblast over which its grip is tenuous at best. Putin will be forced into a decision. divert more troops from other occupied regions to maintain the ground in Kherson, or give it up to Ukraine. Neither is a good choice for Putin. And that brings us nicely to the third unexpected consequence of Ukraine turning Crimea into an island. If Ukraine is able to completely isolate Crimea, and that job hasn't been done yet, then Putin has to make another massive decision. Does he continue pouring troops into the Donbas region that has been at the heart of peace discussions for over a year? Putin desperately wants Ukraine to cede that region, and he has set his soldiers the practically impossible target of snatching it away from Ukraine by September, so we know how much he wants it. Or does Putin divert more forces and equipment to Crimea to shore up its defenses and counteract the isolation, thus weakening the Donbas offensive and further exposing the Russian rear in that region to more aerial strikes? Again, neither is a good choice. Either way, Putin loses whatever grip he thinks he has on a region that he claims should be under Russia's control, and Ukraine is forcing him closer to making his decision. In addition to all of its strikes against Russian logistics, Ukraine's drones also struck Crimea directly on June 21st. Sergei Aksyonov, who is Putin's puppet governor on the peninsula, announced that all fuel sales at gas stations would be suspended on the same day, as a major fuel depot on the peninsula went up in flames. There's only so long this kind of thing can go on before Putin has to make a choice. And that, more than anything else, is what makes Ukraine's Crimea plan so perfect. What we're seeing here in all of this is Ukraine following through on a plan that is simple at its core, but is being executed so brilliantly that it leaves Russia with no real escape. Former US Army Europe commander Ben Hodges explains the plan succinctly. Describing Crimea as the key point of this war, Hodges told UKR Inform what Ukraine is doing during a May 27th interview. Now, to me, this is going to be a little bit simplistic, but there is kind of the first phase, or the first step to the liberation of Crimea, is to isolate it, to cut that road that goes to Zhankoy, to destroy the bridge, Hodges says before adding. And then number two, and this goes to the point of your good question, is to make it untenable, unusable for the Russians. I mean, Ukraine now has the capacity to hit every square meter of Crimea. You have precision strikes that can reach anywhere, and there is no mystery about where the Russians are, where the airfields are, where the navy is, whatever they still have, logistics, it's all there. So you just keep pounding it so that the Russians realize they cannot stay there. There is no use in Crimea for the Russians there. That, in a nutshell, is what Ukraine is doing. The isolation of Crimea serves plenty of purposes in terms of making places like Kherson and Zaporizhia far more dangerous for Russia. Supply lines being cut from Crimea to those regions will inevitably lead to more deaths among Putin's poorly equipped soldiers, and it will also create opportunities for Ukraine to launch counter-offensives across a weakened Russian front. But the goal always is to reclaim Crimea, and rather than sending troops into the peninsula, Ukraine is working toward doing that by making holding Crimea unviable for Putin. As Hodges says, Ukraine knows where every major military target on the island is. The constant campaign against Crimea's air defenses makes those targets hittable. And now that Ukraine is shredding Russian logistics feeding into and out of the peninsula, Russia is in serious trouble. One by one, the tethers are being cut. The June 21st attack represents one more route that Ukraine has just turned into a death zone. Soon, Crimea is going to be cut off, adrift like an island. The peninsula will essentially be blockaded, which impacts Russia's entire Ukraine campaign. Now, Ukraine's task is not just to sustain the pressure being placed on Crimea, but to expand on it. The attacking tempo has to increase, and according to Euromaidan Press, that's what we're already seeing. It says that Ukraine's K2 unit gives a perfect example when it comes to its campaign of destroying Russian supply trucks on the logistical routes that serve Crimea. In April, that unit carried out 258 strikes. May saw the number rise to 344. By mid-June, that unit had struck 215 vehicles, suggesting that it will have cracked 400 by the end of the month. But here's where an already horrific situation for Russia gets serious. Russia knew all of this was coming, and it hasn't been able to do anything to stop it. There was no big secret when it came to Ukraine's plans for Crimea. The country spent much of 2025 using drones to attack Crimean air defenses and military targets on the peninsula. That same year also saw emergence of Ukraine's mid-range strike drone capability, which was widely reported. Fedorov highlights that production increase, stating that Ukraine's defense ministry has already contracted 300% more mid-range strike drones during the first 4 months of 2026 than it did in all of 2025. So if it saw everything coming, why hasn't Russia been able to stop Ukraine? The answer is simple: Russia doesn't have the air defenses. After well over 4 years of war and a Ukrainian campaign that has cost Russia 1,437 air defense systems and counting, a According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, Russia has been left with patchy air defenses at best. When you combine that with the fact that most Russian systems were designed to deal with classic threats such as cruise missiles, you get a recipe for disaster. Mid- and long-range drones entering the equation is a nightmare for most of these systems. They're not designed to deal with these types of targets, and the fact that many drones are made using composite materials such as plastic and plywood makes the situation worse. Systems that are designed to track targets using heat signatures can't do much against drones that aren't showing up on their radars. The Crimean shield is falling apart. And worse yet, Russia can't buy the air defenses needed to reinforce it. In a June 20th report, Euromaidan Press spoke to a drone commander who goes by the call sign Charger. Working with Ukraine's 413th Unmanned Systems Regiment, Charger says that Russia's big problem right now is that it can't get its hands on the microchips it needs to build more air defenses. Because it's a scarce resource, it's very expensive, and even if they just throw a sack of dollars at the manufacturer, air defense won't just materialize because there's no microchip, Charger said, adding, "There is no device where you feed it money and it gives you a microchip that controls an anti-aircraft missile." Bear in mind that Russia also needs microchips for the missiles it's using to attack Ukraine. Feeding one deprives the other, and it's Crimea that's paying the price. Russia has other techniques for dealing with drones. Electronic warfare systems can jam signals to send drones off course, or they could. With the drones that Ukraine is using to cut Crimea off, not even jamming is doing the job. Ukraine's mid-range strike drones don't just make the Russian rear reachable. Many, such as the Hornet, which has been a standout in the 2026 campaign against Crimea, also use artificial intelligence to reach their targets. That takes jammable signals out of the equation, leaving Russia to rely on increasingly worn-out air defense systems that Ukraine has proven can be overcome and struck. All of this means that Russia doesn't have the tools to defend itself against Ukraine's Crimean strategy, and Putin and his cronies see everything coming. Ukraine hasn't made what it's trying to do some big secret that is catching Russia off guard. The defense, in theory, is simple: shut down Ukraine's mid-range strike drones. That's what will save occupied Crimea for Russia, but Russia can't do it. Putin's forces are like rats caught in a trap. The bar is down and the rat knows exactly what problem it needs to solve, but there's no escape. The crippled rat can only wait to die. That's Russia in Crimea right now, watching, waiting, and hoping for a miracle to save its illegal annexation. But that miracle isn't coming. All that's going to arrive in Crimea and the surrounding regions are yet more mid-range strike drones. The trap has been triggered, the life is being squeezed out of Russia, and sooner or later, the lights are going to go out. Putin's Crimea will be over. You could argue that it already is. A peninsula that is supposed to be a symbol of Russia's dominance over Ukraine is now more vulnerable than at any point during Russia's occupation. Crimea has become a liability for Russia, and there's so much more that we can explain when it comes to the how and the why. If you want to find out more, check out our breakdown of the situation in Crimea and why it's so terrible for Putin. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel and check back every day for more videos from The Military Show. And thank you, as always, for watching.